everybody. Thank you very much, Sven. That was very interesting, actually, for all kinds of reasons, this little presentation, because I realized how broad this network is in terms of what it wants to achieve. At one point it says international cooperation in science, full stop. And then it's all about innovation activities and all public procurement, which of course is very market. So it spans a broad area of STI, which is, I think, very good, because we should not constantly artificially de-link the two. But of course, there are very different issues when we talk about innovation compared to cooperation in science. And what we are talking today is much more, of course, about innovation. Sven asked me to give you a broad overview and introduction, and I have 45 minutes. I hope I can manage that. I want to make one initial remark, because we talked about public procurement of innovation as a policy instrument. We have to distinguish, and it's constantly mixed up or not distinguished clearly enough. Public procurement can be a policy instrument. But if we look at public procurement and we measure innovation, in most of the cases, and Lena will maybe support this, it is not done as a policy instrument for innovation. We just measure it, and then we look at it. What does it mean? So if we talk about policies for public procurement of innovation, is very different than looking at public procurement of innovation as a practice. So we can look at what do procurers do, and then we look how much innovation is in there and what can we do maybe to support this. And then we can also look at it. Okay, how can we use the public procurement activity as an innovation policy instrument, which is a different thing. Then we will have to look at what are the conditions and how can we support procurers and public bodies to actually buy more innovation, ask for more innovation, and also then of course using public bodies. So we should be very clear, public procurement is an activity in order to buy, public bodies to buy something that they need to do their job. That's what public procurement is. Public procurement of innovation is sometimes, of course, then used to do the job better, more efficient, and all of that. So we happen to have innovation in there, but we should not, just because of innovation in there, think it is an innovation policy instrument. It can be an innovation policy instrument. That's why we are here. But we have to distinguish between public procurement as a practice and policies to support public procurement of innovation. These are two different things. It's just so. In my talk, it will again, sometimes I will jump a little bit. I hope I will make it clear how I jump. But we have to make this distinction. Not all public procurement that involves innovation is a policy for innovation. It just happens to have innovation in it. So these are a couple of things I'd like to do to give you the overview, and then we have Lena with more in-depth and Max as well with a different perspective on it. So my job is the overview. So I give you a couple of preliminary remarks in terms of demand and innovation, why demand is important for the generation of innovation. We have to understand this background in order to understand why public procurement of innovation can be a policy instrument. And then I will give you a definition, a bit of a delineation, because there is a bit of confusion sometimes when we use the term. Then I will very quickly give you PPI as a policy instrument, so locate it in the policy toolbox, as Sven called it, and policy trends. I don't even have to say much because Sven already did it. And then just one slide to compare. That's PPI, sorry, I don't know why there is PPT. So PPI, public procurement of innovation, and pre-commercial procurement. Again, it's very often mixed up, and we talk about PCP and mean PPI and the other way around. So we have to distinguish. These are two very different things. They can become very close, but they are different things. And then I talk a little bit about justification for demand side and PPI policies. Why do we need, or what is the rationale for having policies on the demand side and for public procurers? Why should we have the policies? I think that should be clear, but I think it's important to have this justification. I can justify that in a bit. And a bit of empirical evidence. We've done all kinds of studies, case studies, and also survey of suppliers to public bodies in the UK, which give you a couple of insights as to what the problems are and the potential leverage of public procurement in terms of innovation. And I conclude with a couple of challenges of PPI policy and some takeaway messages. So so the meaning of demand for innovation. There's a whole lot of literature about why demand is important for innovation, and maybe a bit of provocative statement by Freeman, who is a grand seigneur of innovation studies in certain, I would say, saying that efficient diffusion of innovation is more important than being lead innovator for development and growth. So the conditions for diffusion of innovation in an economy, at whatever level we talk about, is extremely important. So looking at the demand condition is important. What is demand for innovation? It's a signal to the market to acquire a new product or service on the basis of a need that you have and for a certain price. So we have to distinguish between a want, I want something, and a need, I think I need something, and the actual demand, which is I'm ready to pay a certain price to actually get it. So we have to talk about the price here as well, and the readiness to actually buy. Users are often source for innovation, so what people want, or organizations want, sends of course signals to suppliers, but they also often are source of innovation. They have their own ideas as to what should be innovation. Often they actually try to generate innovation themselves and then do it together with suppliers. And there's an academic called von Hippel who has studied these things since the 1970s to actually show how much innovation actually comes from users, being it public bodies, being it private consumers. Early users are important to send signals, demonstration, further improvement. So wherever you have your test market as a company for innovation makes a difference. So if your country is a test market, there's a higher likelihood that a test market in the sense that there's a lot of ability and readiness to actually buy a new product and a new service. There's a high likelihood that there are more innovation generated in this country, in this location, because of this test market and improvement and interaction that you need for that. So the conditions of being an early market are very important. Now, when we look at supplier firms, there are all kinds of studies done. What are the bottlenecks and hindrances for innovation? And demand conditions have been repeatedly shown to be the most important hindrance. So it's not so much the supply of new knowledge from universities, cooperation with universities and all of that. It is much more the demand conditions. So policy for many years has concentrated on the supply conditions and on cooperation between public bodies and industry, while the demand side actually has been neglected, despite the fact that firms say demand conditions are so important and are the most important bottleneck for innovations, for all kinds of reasons. And proximity still matters. There is a bit of tension, of course, in that, but all in all we can say that proximity still matters. If you are close to, as I said already, if you are close to a market that is ready to buy an innovation early on, there are some advantages. So a country is more attractive for investors that generate innovations if it is also an early market. And there has been a huge policy debate about this in recent years in Europe, and I come back to that in a minute. But the demand conditions as such, as an important variable for generating and diffusing innovation, have been somehow neglected, certainly in the policy discourse, until maybe, let's say, 2005 or something like that, or until, let's say, 10 years ago. They weren't really important. This has now become much more important again. Now we have to distinguish different ways in which demand spurs innovation or influences innovation. You can, as a public body, as a private firm, maybe even consumers, you can ask for something new. You can trigger innovation because you have a new requirement, a new functional requirement. There's a new need that's coming up. You want something to be done differently, more efficiently, or in a different way. And then supply side has to react. So you trigger an innovation by asking for something new. That's one way how you can influence innovation. The other way, of course, is that you are responsive, you are open to adopt, to try out, to buy what is offered to you by the supply side. So they constantly innovate, of course, on the supply side, and they suggest that something that is better, you should buy it. So economies differ in the way they respond to these innovations that are offered to them. But there are two different things. You ask something new, you trigger something new, or you are responsive to something that is produced, something new that is produced. That is not an academic distinction. That is very important when we look later on at public procurement of innovation, because there are differences. You know, the PCP stuff, pre-commercial procurement, is very much in the first bullet. It is about asking something new, and something new has to be developed. Public procurement of innovation, some say it's only public procurement of innovation if you trigger something new. Personally, my stand is different. It's also about adoption and diffusion of innovations. Therefore, the ability of public bodies to respond to innovations that are out there is also a matter of public procurement of innovation. We can debate that. Some people have a bit of a more narrow definition. But we have to distinguish these two ways. And then there's a third way, where that is all kind of interaction, the role of the user. So public bodies often might co-produce. They might have an idea. They might start to develop something and then link up with suppliers. So all kinds of interaction where you do something together. So it's triggering an innovation. It is responding to innovation, and it's somehow interacting in the process of innovation that we have to distinguish. And policies to improve demand conditions in all different variations have been shown in different surveys for firms to be very important. So firms were asked for a couple of years, they were asked, what policies do you think are important in terms of innovation? And improving demand conditions has been at the very top of the scale, much more than cooperation with universities, for example, and so on. So it's a much broader phenomenon, caring about demand conditions. So public procurement of innovation. And that's just some kind of nominal definition, the way I define it. So state actors ask for and buy a product or service that is new to them. Not everybody agrees with that definition. Charles Edquist, for example, thinks that is too broad. He thinks, and he's another grand seigneur and the co-operator of Lena in the first wave of technological procurement in
the guru. I was just
yes,
working with a guru.
Okay, the guru. And we have a bit of a semi-public, semi-serious fight at the moment, because I take it a bit broader. I think diffusion of innovation, things that are new for the buying organization, also should be considered as public procurement of innovation, because they mean for the buying organization, they also mean learning, adoption, all kinds of transaction costs, risk management, and so on. So the fact that something new is already there, but it's still new for the organization, does not mean that there are no efforts to be taken by the buyer to actually make it happen. While Charles thinks it's only public procurement of innovation if the demand for it, the purchase, creates something new. So that the suppliers have to create an innovation. And I personally, and I come back to the previous slide, I think the responding to an innovation, if it really means disruption for the organization that buys, also must be considered in all this, because it's very much also about diffusion. You should not also only look at to get the next new thing done because you ask for it. That's of course important, maybe even more important, but I define it broader. So that's how I define it. And we can discuss, but I think if we look at demand conditions more broadly, and the need for learning and the transaction costs and the risk management and the business case and everything that is involved in buying that is new for your organization, even if it's already out there. If we look at all these obstacles for public organizations, I think we should have a broader view. But maybe Lena can then comment later on what her take is. So public procurement as a policy instrument, that's very different. There is a conscious public activity to improve the way public organizations ask for, buy and adopt innovation. That is a conscious policy. That's different from simply looking at what public procurers are doing. That's a policy. So, but it has come now as a policy instrument. We all know it. That's why we are here. It is a policy instrument. So this is just one of the many different taxonomies of innovation policies. It just tells you that supply side measures that directly support those who generate knowledge, technology, and innovation are much more differentiated. We have a long history of all these measures. And then demand side measures, here we don't have that much differentiation, but of course there are a lot of. Now, of course, that is a bit artificial. There are all kinds of linkages, and some of the regulations that we have on demand side measures are at the same time also have an effect on the supply side and so on. So that's a bit artificial, but it simply shows you that there are a big toolbox, and part of that is now demand side measures. Now I've zoomed into this demand side measures on the very right in a couple of publications for quite some years, and that's now the toolbox or the kind of instruments you have on the demand side. So instruments that somehow support demanders or potential demanders in their ability and willingness to buy innovation. So public procurement is one instrument of demand side policies. There are many others. But demand side policies, and Sven's chart has shown that very nicely, is very often limited or very, very quickly focused and limited to public procurement of innovation, and at the European level even more on pre-commercial procurement. So we talk all about demand side measures, but then if you look what really happens, we have schemes for PCP. And by PCP, if you look very closely, I'll come back to that in a minute, actually it's a supply side measure. It's just triggered by a public need, but very often there is no purchase of any innovation at all. There's just a purchase of an R&D service to create a prototype. So in a way, we have all these instruments, but we don't have very much systematic policy across the board. There have been very nice examples in the energy sector, mainly in the 1990s, 1980s, market transformation, energy management, demand management programs, where you had a combination of all of this in order to transform a market towards a more energy efficient technology. And there are all kinds of examples, especially in Sweden, they're nicely documented, their evaluations, where you combine public procurement with trying to increase private procurement, private buying, with all kinds of measures in marketing, awareness, training, all of that. So there are all kinds of hindrances, system failures as we call them, systems bottlenecks as we call them in innovation studies, that can be remedied with these kinds of instruments. So public procurement is just one part of that. We have demand subsidies and demand tax incentives, which is direct measures to us as consumers, as buyers, to private and public buyers, to buy an innovation that we think as society needs to be pushed. Photovoltaic in Germany, we have all kinds of subsidies for 15 years now to push this technology. We give money, or we give money through tax incentives or subsidies to the buyer to lower the cost of buying innovation that we think is important to buy. And then there are all kinds of awareness measures and labels and so on. There is training, demonstration projects to increase our trust in an innovation, to understand how it works. So there are all kinds of things that public bodies can do in order to improve the ability and increase the willingness of all demanders, not only public, to buy innovation or to ask for innovation. And there are a mix of measures that I talked about, the demand management things in the energy sector, where you can really see how then you link all that. And then I have pre-commercial procurement here at the very end, because as I already explained, I think that it's a bit of a combination of supply and demand. Ideally, if it works, it's a wonderful instrument, but there are all kinds of issues why it doesn't really work as it should work, at least in the kind of schemes that we know in Europe. Now this is outdated. Sven had a better chart. This is now 3 years old, and I'm sure the picture looks again very different. There has been a surge in demand-based policies. We have looked through trend chart report. That is, trend chart is Era Watch and trend chart have been intelligence instruments to monitor and analyze national policies and innovation, and also science in Era Watch. And we looked at what kind of instruments are out there in terms of demand side. And this is 3 years ago, so that's outdated. But what you can see is all about public procurement of innovation. That is where everybody, John and Sven's chart made that clear as well. And if you zoom into public procurement of innovation a bit more, you see that very often activities where public procurement of innovation happened are sold as a policy. But there have not been a policy. There was no public coordinated action with the clear goals, programming and so on. But or you look at pre-commercial procurement, which is also under this first heading, which is not so. The picture is not as positive as it maybe looks here. But clearly there is surge in these kind of policies. That's all what this chart should say, and it's outdated. It's just a signal. Now one chart to make the difference clear, but I think I already said that. So we have to really make the difference very clear. And when we look, I haven't seen the slides of Bertrand Wert, at least not Sven's 23 slide version. But I know that the European Commission mainly works through pre-commercial procurement for all kinds of reasons, because that's where they have a real leverage. But that often does not lead to the procurement of innovation. It leads to the generation of a prototype. So public procurement of innovation is the purchase of a service or a good that is novel to the purchaser or to the supplier. It's normally part of a general procurement and delivery agenda. You buy an innovation because you think as a public body it is more effective and efficient if you buy the innovation. That's it. That's public procurement of innovation. It can be used as a policy instrument. Then you have to think, how do you spur this? What do you do in order to make this more likely? That's what it is. But pre-commercial procurement is different. It's the purchase of an R&D service. You buy something, but you don't buy a product. You buy the service to develop a new solution. So up to the prototype, or sometimes to the first batch where there are a couple of prototypes out there. And it has to do with risk-reward sharing. The IPR is shared. There are different models of where the IPR goes. Now the actual uptake of the innovation that is produced is not part of pre-commercial procurement. It's then shifting towards the normal public procurement. Very often this is not happening. In the European schemes, in the UK, we are just, as I speak, we are evaluating the UK PCP scheme as we speak. Technopolis has evaluated the Netherlands PCP scheme 2 or 3 years ago. The general sense that we have is already, I might be wrong, but from the Netherlands studies and from my first interview discussions and so on, the schemes often do lead to new solutions, but no one buys it. Because there is specific budget and there is support to go out and have a call, and so that various departments, it's often done by an innovation agency, and then you have a pot of money that is additional, and then different departments can use part of that pot to define a need and then to get a prototype produced for them. So they are actually asked, sometimes obliged, they have to use that scheme because that is an important policy priority now in these countries. So they use that scheme, they get out for a call and they have a prototype developed. But then no one in these departments actually has the responsibility or the obligation or the commitment to actually buy what has been produced. And often, not always of course, there are good success stories out there, and I'm sure Bertrand has 10 of them in his slides. There are success stories, and I don't want to belittle this instrument, I just want to be a bit more robust in our assessment. Very often, after the R&D service, not much happens. Now that doesn't mean that this money is wasted, of course. Knowledge is created, technology is created, new solutions are created, and often then private demand picks up, and all kinds of other things happen with that prototype. So I'm not saying it's wasted money, but it's almost like a risk capital scheme where you support potential innovators in a very tricky phase of the development process, where they are very near to the solution, but don't have it as yet, don't have the first buyer, so they get money to finish the job often. And then good things happen very often. We know it from the US scheme, but very often nothing happens. Certainly not for in the public bodies who often do not buy. So we have to think of what are the best mechanisms to make sure that actually there is a commitment to also buy and to trigger a market on the basis of that scheme. And there has been a marvelous little scheme in the UK, never rolled out, miracle to me. It's called Forward Commitment Procurement, which is very similar to this, but you make a commitment that if certain requirements are met by the prototype, you buy a certain number of items, depending on what it is. So we have good examples where this all has happened, they met the requirements, and then 500 or 1,000 mattresses in prisons, is one example, have been bought. Because, and the supplier invested because they knew if we meet the requirements, there is a market. And mostly in PCP we don't have this.
Can I add a small comment?
Of course.
Jakob, because you mentioned that the EU Commission is mostly on the pre-commercial procurement side, and I think there's a good reason for it, because the competence, the Commission is seldom the end user in this context, but they are the funding institution of especially the framework program. And the competence or the mandate for the framework program is of course on the pre-commercial side. So it's the basic tool that and other programs that they have available. So I think it's sort of automatically it lands in that box. Yeah.
Okay, since to launch the debate and in defense of the Commission. The Commission has no procurement budget itself except for small things.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, the Commission has worked in terms of regulatory framework and pushing policies in the context of the open method of coordination. DG Research and DG Enterprise, they are very much in favor of real public procurement for innovation.
Yeah.
PCP is more DG Connect.
Exactly.
I agree with all that, but I see the danger that if the Commission itself talks about demand-side policies and then very quickly it's all reduced to what they can do because that's the Commission, then of course we miss out on many of the things that we're talking about. First. Second, I confronted Peter Dröll, who is one of the big brains in the Commission. I really like him a lot and he has made a lot of change. But I confronted him and said, well, of course you have a little budget. I agree with that, but you have a budget. You are a buyer. If it's just cars, if it's just the new buildings, you are a buyer of things and services, and you are not doing what you preach. You are not. They are more risk averse because of all kinds of things that we know about European debates about money spending and all of that. They are not more innovative in what they buy than other public buyers. They could lead by example and they don't. And he was a bit surprised by my remark. So now this is maybe again going a bit far, but so bear with me, you have to survive the next 3 minutes. This is now again zooming back in and looking at the justifications for demand-side policies where of course public procurement is an essential part for it. So the policies, intelligent public action can overcome various kinds of bottlenecks. So the justification, I try to discuss the justifications for demand-side policies, many of which I already somehow mentioned in passing, but that is just a bit more systematic. And so there are 3 bundles of justifications why demand-side policies I think are important. One is what we call market or system failures that hamper market entry and diffusion of innovation. And so I don't go through all of this, and I've written about it, and whoever is more interested. But there is a theoretical economic justification, or there's good reason why there are these failures, and why things on the demand side don't work as smoothly, as nicely as we normally would have it in a free economy of demand and supply, where you think, why doesn't it happen? There are all kinds of reasons why it doesn't happen. Information asymmetries, lack of interaction, lack of capabilities and willingness. So there's a new innovation out there and we don't know how to use it. In the 1980s and 90s we had computer-aided manufacturing, computer-aided design. All of a sudden, and all these engineers and people in factories didn't know how to use it, and there were public programs to support the introduction of a new technology, process technology, in firms. And people were educated and trained how to use these kind of things, so it could be rolled out. So there's a bottleneck on the demand side. It's all public, it's all there, it's perfectly working, but no one can use it, for example. So there are all kinds of problems on the demand side that can be tackled by public policy. And it has to do with risk aversion and path dependencies. You are locked in a certain technology, so it's a lot of transaction costs to shift, and maybe a bit of subsidy, a bit of push can maybe overcome these kind of transaction costs. And so on. I mean, there are all kinds of dangers there, and I will come back to that later on, but that is one justification. The other justification that's closer to public procurement debate, but we should not, when we talk about public procurement, forget about the first bundle of problems. These problems are, of course, also there on the public side. It's not only private consumers have these kind of problems, it's everywhere. So that's one reason why we should think carefully, what do we ask from public procurers? When we simply tell them you should buy more innovation, there are all kinds of issues why they maybe not be able, and there are even more, and I'll come back to that in a minute when I zoom into public procurement, but there are all kinds of problems in principle for private and public. And then we have public sector needs. So we might not have too many of these obstacles, but the whole diffusion of products and services that we as society would want to see diffused because they serve a purpose, sustainability, health, all kinds of things. We want certain products and technologies and solutions and services out there as a society. We want it, and it's going too slow, and it doesn't make sense to give more money to suppliers. Maybe that would bring down the price a little bit, but there would be too much windfall. We need to tackle the issues on the demand, so we invest in order to make this quicker because we have a public need, and that's of course, justification of public procurement of innovation. You buy something in order to do the public policy job better, whatever the challenge is that you are tackling. That's what you do. So that's the second bundle of and then the third is of course the one that is sometimes in conflict with the second one, which is you do it in order to support your industry that provides the solutions. So you hope to support local producers, service providers, and by supporting demand here and there, you hope to trigger a real demand and to make a virtuous circle, and then it takes off and the market flies. So you improve demand conditions in order to support your suppliers indirectly. And you can immediately sense the tension between the second and the third. And there is big tension, and I made a little bit of a meta-analysis of existing evidence on demand-side policies. It's on the web. If you are interested, I can give you the link. It's a 40-page report looking at what demand-side policies actually deliver. Demand-side policies, subsidies, tax incentives, trigger innovation not only in the country where they are applied, but also in other countries where then there is import. So, while you have maybe photovoltaic in 20% of German households, or 5%, whatever it is, that's not that much, but you have been successful in pushing this, so we are happy as society because we have now less carbon footprint, we have more photovoltaic, that's great, second bundle, but if you look at where it comes from, it's China. Most of the stuff is imported from China because they have made this technological jump, and there's a lot of now the value added, the actual money that is generated in the production is done not in Germany. Most of it, of course, that's a bit too simple. There are all kinds of positive effects for Germany as well. So I'm simplifying, but there is a tension. So if you're a public procurer and you want to buy a new lighting system for all of Hamburg, which we had in a case in a study that we did 8 years ago, and the best solution comes from the Netherlands, you might find in the German tabloid press a big thing that millions and millions of public money going to the Netherlands. Why is that? And then you have to explain because they have the better solution. So you have a tension. That's just a fact, you have a tension. You can explain why it's still good to buy from Netherlands, because not only do you have a better energy efficient lighting system, which saves you all kinds of money, it's more sustainable, but you have all kinds of spillover effects in your local economy of maintenance and service and putting pressure on other suppliers in Germany to catch up. So you have all kinds of economic spillover effects, and you have the sustainability effect and the efficiency effect of spending less for energy. But the initial effect in terms of who gets the money for supplying the lighting has been in the Netherlands with German taxpayer money. Can you imagine? So that's just a tension that public procurement as a policy and as a practice faces. Empirical evidence, so that's just again, that could be a 2-hour talk, so I just give you some highlights. Now I zoom into the public procurement practice. We have to again change heads somehow. It's not public procurement as a practice. It's not about innovation policy at all here. We simply asked 800 firms that we knew from our database that we had that supplied the public sector. Many of them supplied public and private, so we could make a bit of comparison between the public as buyer and the private as buyer. But we asked suppliers about their supply of innovation to public bodies. So that's what we did. So we asked for types of innovation, for their procurement experience, procurement innovation, how it works together, some kind of general assessment about the process and the hindrances and so on. So
this was done across which countries?
UK, sorry. It was done in UK and involved national governments, suppliers, some regional or municipality suppliers, and also NHS. And there are all kinds of reports, and I can give you more detail. So this is just headlines. I put that together because we have limited time. Each of the bullets would be a slide in its own right. But what we saw, and that is actually in a way a positive surprise, that 2/3 of all suppliers report that that they innovated, that they invested in innovation, often incremental, but still, when as a result of public procurement activity or as a result of bidding for a public procurement. So there is innovation. It's out there. Public bodies contribute considerably to the innovation activities of these firms, which is an important result as such. So as a practice, it is not that the public body is so risk averse and so shy of spending money on innovation that nothing happens. Quite some things happen, but it could be much better compared to that. Much of this innovation is hidden, so there's a lot of process innovation. A lot of things happen within companies when they bid for public tenders that we don't see as an end result, but they try to be more efficient because it's all cost driven, so they have to improve their internal processes, and by doing so innovate in process technologies. We don't see that in the final product, but a lot of innovation is hidden, so there's more innovation in the public procurement system than we often think. Public authorities also can trigger or co-produce innovation solutions, so there's quite a percentage, I forgot how high it is, but I could go back to the number, where public authorities actually really are a source for innovation. We ask them, your source for innovation, and when we compare, that's interesting, when we compare, for those suppliers that supply to public and private, we compare and we ask the question, what is your source of innovation? There's a higher percentage that say public bodies are a source of innovation than private buyers. So there is some awareness in public bodies in terms of asking something new. Large firms seem to benefit more than small firms. So SMEs have a bit of an issue with supply chain of large firms, needs to become much more in the focus. We have now a research program with a colleague of mine to look at what happens actually with small firms in the supply chain of large firms when delivering to public bodies. Is anything to be done as a policy instrument to maybe bring in small companies more? And central government is a bit more likely to buy innovation than city municipalities and even the NHS. So on the regional level, at least in the UK, municipality level, there's a bit less willingness to buy innovation. Now, you might not be able to read this, doesn't really matter that much. So we asked which practices encourage innovation in terms of let's start public procurement practice. So what is it that makes it more likely that you actually deliver an innovation to the public body? First one is obvious, of course, innovation requirements in tenders. You can put an innovation requirement in tenders. It's possible to have formulation where you ask for something new. It's possible. And it's no surprise, but it's important that it's there, that they all say if they put innovation, if you ask for innovation, you get innovation. It can be done. So it's very simple. Early interaction with procuring organization. So we know regulation, you are not supposed to interact, you have to interact with everybody at the same level at a certain stage, but of course there are ways to interact with potential suppliers very early on. Maybe long before you actually formulate the tender, you can understand what is their pipeline, what is my need, what is out there in the industry. You can have early interactions of all kinds, and they make a big difference. 2/3 say this helps me to innovate. Outcome-based specification, we all know what that is. You don't say exactly how you want the solution to be produced. You simply tell them what you want as a solution. So you don't say I want a more efficient bus that has 20% less carbon emission. You say I want a more efficient transport from A to B. And you might be, then the solution might be something that actually makes the transport obsolete, like totally different solution. Not a better transport, but a totally different way of doing things. So outcome-based specification, of course, is more likely to lead to innovation than if you have a concrete specification out there. Advanced communication of future needs, very similar to the second point. So again, it's a communication to tell suppliers these are the kinds of things you can expect in the years to come. The UK government was supposed to be the greenest government ever in the history of human mankind. And that was the vision. And then, of course, after 18 months, the crisis and all the budget, and totally all kinds of programs and new procurement activities have been stopped. Not priority anymore. In that kind of environment, of course, that doesn't happen if you cannot rely on policy principles and goals that you set. Emphasis on sustainability criteria, very important, totally underrated, I think, because we all buy into the sustainability and green procurement as a way to do things in terms of sustainability. There's a lot of innovation in there, so we could combine this much more. I really think we should combine this much more. If we focus on sustainability, there's a high likelihood that you get innovation as well, because the green procurement agenda is already very, very much established, but could be more ambitious in terms of what kind of innovations are asked for. Full life cycle cost consideration, competitive dialogue, which is some kind of mechanism to spur interaction in the process. So it's again some interaction and so. And then things that are less important: negotiated tender, open competitive tender, framework agreement, and so on. But I'm focusing on those top half, because these are the ones that seem to make a difference. Now that is what suppliers say is important for them. And the next slide tells you how often they experience these activities and these practices. So the light bars are how many of the share of companies that frequently experience this practice. So you see a gap. Those practices that are very likely to lead to innovation are less frequently experienced. So procurers don't do the right things in order to spur innovation. That's the main message of this, and I think it's a very powerful message. We ask for further barriers, and for those of you who have discussed them for Lena, that's very boring, but these are the barriers we know of. I mean, there's no real surprise in there, but it's important to also get the supplier's view on it. So too much emphasis on price. At the end of the day, it is often about the price and all the life cycle costing and all the additional benefits and the spillovers and all of that. You know, all the ideas of buying innovation so that the supplier later on has a market in the private market and you spur something very great. The procurer who has to buy doesn't care. It's not his obligation to create a lead market to help the supplier firm at all. He only cares about what is in it for me in terms of risk, in terms of benefit, in terms of cost. That's all that is in. And at the end of the day, it's often reduced to price. They don't. All these other effects that we have, they are not monetarized. They don't care for the decision of the procurer. Why should they? He would have failed his job if they made a difference. They only make a difference to him if he's asked to do so, if he's charged with considering all these other effects. But of course, even in his own little world, the public procurer should not, of course, base it on price. We know that. They should have a much different understanding of life cycle costing and most economically advantageous offer and so on. So there are all kinds of mechanisms where you should not end up with only price. We know that, but still they do it. Lack of interaction, we already see that. It is so important to have interaction in all kinds of ways. You don't have to violate the regulations to interact. We know that it can be done. We often hide behind regulations. You cannot interact. That's not true at all. Variance not allowed. I mean, a lot of people still seem to have tenders where you don't put this one little sentence where you simply say, that's the specification we need, but if you come up with another solution that also does the job, you may offer it to us. Variance allowed. Often they're not allowed, which is a very simple thing. You just open it up to a bit more variety. Create variety. And if there's variety is killed, you don't get innovation. Risk averse public procurers. Specifications too prescriptive. Again, no variety. Low capabilities of procurers. Poor management of risk. And Lena and I have worked at risk management, public procurement. That's clearly an issue. And the other couple of other things are a bit more ambiguous, because for some companies contracts should be longer, for other companies contracts should be shorter, so that the picture gets a bit blurred towards the bottom half of the table, but the top half is very clear. These are the main issues: price, lack of variation and variance, risk aversion, and capabilities of procurers are maybe in the perception of the suppliers. I think there are more problems, but in suppliers. Risk aversion and lack of knowledge. So we asked if companies agreed on, and public procurers are knowledgeable about the technical aspects. In a way, it just confirms it's not a good slide. I just realized, because I've tried to make it better and I totally didn't improve it. In a way, it simply says that there's a big share of companies out there that think that procurers are not knowledgeable enough, and that they don't make effective use of supply chain, and that they're not knowledgeable about their own needs and the technology out there. It just in a way confirms some of the things I said earlier. Now, challenges of PPI policy. There are all kinds of issues when you try to design demand-side policies and policies to support public procurement of innovation, and some of them are already out there from what I've said already. But if you want to design it as a policy. We're now back at the policy level. I'm not talking about the individual procurer. I'm talking about the policy level. What kind of decisions, what kind of things would you have to have in place? Strategic intelligence. I mean, if you really want to use it as a forward-looking policy tool, you need to identify what the needs are, the mid-term and long-term needs of organizations. Very often we don't really have a good process of identifying needs, societal needs, and then how they break down to concrete needs of concrete organizations in their concrete procurement decisions. So how can we define these needs? How can we support organizations in defining these needs? And then an innovation for a public body often means that you have to have all kinds of organizational change. And often innovation doesn't happen because there is a lot of, not only risk aversion in terms it doesn't work, but also risk aversion in terms of there are so many changes, so many things I need to do differently, in terms of learning, in terms of changing responsibilities, in terms of making a certain department obsolete, because with this new innovation we don't need that function anymore, we do it differently. So we have all kinds of resistances. So identifying the need for change and how you overcome these challenges is quite tricky. And it's a policy, it's a policy issue, and also knowing the pipeline of what is out there and what can actually be delivered. If you, and that is a finding of some other studies we've done, if you are too early with a policy that tries to support a certain technology through public procurement, you can actually be counterproductive, because you can lock in suppliers into an immature technology and can make them stop investing in constant improvements for technology to reach a stage of maturity that then is also attractive to all kinds of markets out there. So you could, the timing of that and knowing what they actually could deliver can actually be tricky, and you can be counterproductive when we talk about the policy level. And then of course there's all kinds of coordination issues. We talk here about innovation policy. So we look at what kind of innovation policies and public procurement policies does the German Ministry of Economy have, or BIS in the UK, or other economic ministries. Because we are talking about innovation here. But in reality, these are not the bodies who buy at all. They're not responsible for for departments who buy. BIS doesn't buy. They don't buy in the UK, in the Department for Business Innovation and Skills. The German Economy of Ministry, they are not responsible for purchasing at all. But it's innovation policy. So there's all kinds of coordination. If you take it as a policy, it's serious, then of course we would have to coordinate fiscal policy, the treasury is most important, what are the guidelines for procurement, innovation economics policy, social and education policy, and of course all these sectoral government policies. It's about transport, it's about energy, it's about health policies. Defining needs there, buying there, and having demand policies formulated there, and then looking what does it mean for innovation policy. So this coordination is not trivial at all. So I really do not understand why, when we talk about the demand side, innovation policy is not seen as a horizontal policy to support other policies, rather than trying to have these artificial schemes. And that's why they come up with PCP. Oh, that's something we know, that's something we can do, let's do PCP. Rather than being supportive for other departments to really roll out public procurement seriously, where there are the needs in other ministries. They are not in the ministries of economy. That's why they have all these agencies that try to do PCP and improve the system a little bit. That's all fine, but it doesn't really tackle the real issue. That's my. And then of course there's another way of coordination, that is critical mass. As a city where you have only a limited number of items you can buy, you might not have the power, the purchasing power to really make an innovation change. But if you bundle it, you can make a real difference. That's why the networks of procurers comes in. That's of course very important, and I appreciate that the Commission tries to do that transnationally. I really do. I'm not cynical about the Commission. They try to do a lot of good things here. So the tensions, I mean, I already talked about tensions. I can be quick. I think I've used my 45 minutes. Who benefits? If it's innovation policy, you ask which firms innovate because of our policies. If it's health policy, you ask how can we improve the health service? I don't care who supplies it at all. So there's a tension. And then of course there's international tension, national champion policy versus international firms. We have this tension. If we do it European, it's maybe a bit differently, but still at the end of the day, it's national taxpayers' money that is spent, and this tension won't go away. Now, very short, only just an impression, because we talk of public procurement of innovation as a practice, and then we talk about it as policy. So what kind of policies are out there? We did a bit of a survey. That's not really in-depth analysis over years and years. It's just on the basis of policy reports and evaluation and so on that we could find. And it was mainly done by a colleague of mine, Elvira, and I was involved also in one of the publications. So there are already all kinds of policy schemes out there. That's the main message here. All kinds of policy schemes out there, and I have a table that I could show if you want to discuss that. And that try to do these kind of things, so improving organizational capabilities, that try to improve the ways public organizations buy. So there are schemes to help public organizations to buy, or to make them more aware of the dimension of buying innovation. For example, innovation procurement plans in the UK. Very simple tool. You simply have to say, every year you give me not only your procurement plan, so all departments had to give a procurement plan, but this procurement plan must have a whole section to showcase what is it you want to buy in terms of innovation. What new needs do you have? What do you expect to buy in terms of innovation? You can say that's just some kind of window dressing exercise, but in some departments who were very skeptical, then it triggered a totally different understanding. It said, okay, we have to have a strategic discussion in the department. What is it we and our agencies could and should buy in order to push our agenda? What is the innovation? What are the obstacles to do so? And it has triggered, certainly in the Department of Health, has triggered all kinds of good things. They stopped it. The Tory government has stopped that.
Do you have any idea in terms of, are there any results in terms of...
Mike.
Are there any results in terms of how efficient they have been?
No, they have been introduced for 2 or 3 years, and then the Tory government came in and stopped this, because the agenda was austerity and cutting budgets, and not about innovation, costly and so on. So it's only anecdotal. I've talked to people responsible for in the Department of Business Innovation Skills, responsible for the scheme, and I talked to 2 people in ministries who delivered this study. So very diverse. Some departments didn't really deliver nicely, and nothing happened. Quite frankly, in other departments, it triggered something. It helped those activists who thought this is an important agenda. It helped them. It gave them a leverage saying, we have to do this, so do it properly. So it's a very simple mechanism, but it can change something in the mindset of people. Improving communication and signaling, so bringing together suppliers and demanders on innovation platforms to understand what is in the pipeline in terms of needs, what is in the pipeline in terms of industrial and technological development. So let's another scheme, and then risk financing, risk management. Lena knows that very well. So there are all kinds of schemes to lower the risk on both sides. The main message of this, and there are all kinds of different schemes out there to tackle these 3 things. The main message is that there's a very poor rollout. All of these schemes, in theory, make a lot of sense, and we have anecdotal evidence that they can work and have worked very well, but they are not rolled out at all. There are all kinds of implementation, governance challenges, and at the end of the day, it's public money, and the price matters comes back again and again. There are too many implementation challenges in organizations. So, last slides for conclusions at different levels. So, public procurement of innovation is a potential tool for innovation policy. It is a potential tool. We should not simply equate everything that is public procurement as a policy instrument. It can be, so that's why I said, Sven, in one of your charts, where it was only reporting the number and value of public procurement activities, that's not an instrument of innovation policy. It's just public procurement activity as such. And then your next slide, you had it as an instrument. That was very valid. So we can see how policymakers in these countries think public procurement is used as an instrument. But I bet you, if you ask these people properly and tell them what do you mean as instrument, they might also confuse practice and instrument here. Because as a policy, you need to have a conscious set of public action to improve the ability and willingness to buy innovation. That is what you have, and often we don't see it. So we have a combination of economic, sectoral, and social policy aims. So we have to see these tensions and combinations. There is another distinction, not only policy in practice, but also general procurement and strategic procurement. So you can have strategic procurement, you can say we have certain societal challenges, we want certain things to happen. We invest in certain things. Among many things, we also have public procurement of innovation in these areas because we want a strategic change here. That's one thing. The other thing is, you can say all of our procurement, everything we procure should be done with a much more better awareness of the innovation dimension. Everything. So it's not, so we have again to distinguish the two. Do we use it as both should be done, but it's two different things. To make all procurement more aware of the innovation dimension and make them more likely to buy innovation is one thing, and it might help. It's hard to measure, but it might help the whole innovation system. And the other thing is to say we have societal challenges, certain of big issues, we invest in buying new energy efficient technologies in the future, and that's strategic procurement. It needs to be distinct. And then again, that's the at-risk controversy, where it's not only about the brand new thing that has to be developed, it's also about being open for innovation that are offered to you. So that's a couple of practical to-dos. We maybe in this group we don't have to go too deep into that, but that is actually what is it one should do when we talk about innovation. That's based on all our case study work and our survey work. So it reads very simple, but these are a couple of principles one should really think of when we think about making the whole system more innovation prone. Ask for innovation explicitly as public procurement, as public body. Communicate and interact as early as possible. Sending signals early as possible and be consistent. This is our policy and we want to invest in different fleet of cars in the future and so on. Allow variety. When buying green, link it to innovation. The green procurement is so established, we have whole networks, we have whole kinds of activities in green procurement. But if you look at it, and there's just a call out from the European Commission, there's a call out to improve green procurement so that procurers across Europe are more able to buy state-of-the-art technology. That's the call text out there. I've participated in the call. That's the call text. They say more able and willing to buy state-of-the-art technology. State-of-the-art technology, that means that we are all responsive. That's good. So that public procurers are now better able to buy the latest gear out there. That is good. But why is there not a half sentence? And also to make them more able and willing to maybe ask for even better, to trigger something new. It's not in this call text. A lot of money is spent to make procurers more able to respond to what is offered to them. That's good. But they stop short of that and don't use the green procurement agenda to really try to get one step further. And I'm a bit irritated by that. And then use practices intelligently, outcome-based outcome specifications and so on. These are issues within organizations, again, that is too much into, but we have to see that there are all kinds of issues within organizations. We know that from all our case studies that hinder procurement of innovation because they mean change, they mean transaction costs, they mean different incentive structures for different people. A procurer doesn't have the benefit of an innovation when it's bought. He doesn't have the benefit, but he has clearly the problem if it doesn't work. He has a problem. So why should he go for an innovation? But if it's done in a team whereby the actual champion of the whole process is not the procurer is only a tool, a technical tool, nothing else. But the guy who's responsible for using the innovation should drive the process. And then we have a totally different understanding of risk-reward. But the way it's done, risk is here and reward is here. Why should he do it? I wouldn't do it as a procurer. I definitely would not do it. So these are things one need to do within organizations to make it work. And that's based on many case studies. And Lena has done a lot of the work as well. And these are not new things, but we have to remind ourselves. So simply tell procurers, buy more innovation. We got rid of all these context conditions that are bad for you. Regulations are different. Now do it. Look at all of this. A lot of things have to happen in organizations to make it happen. That's just the list of things that need to change in organizations. And these are all things that can be tackled by policy and by intelligent, managing of large organizations. That is where we are. I'm not sure if I used my 45 minutes, but thank you very much. So I thought that's an overview of public procurement innovation as practice and policy.
Very good. Thank you, Jakob. You didn't use 45 but 60 minutes, so that's fine. That's very fine. I appreciate this. This is really the broad, complete picture, if you will, as an introduction to the whole exercise. I would like to ask, coffee is just around the corner here, so
Yeah, good.
we will not sit long, but I think we should allow for a couple of sort of questions at least, and then we revert to this broader discussions later. But I have one question, because in your survey you asked innovators, suppliers, companies, and you found a mismatch and so on and so forth. I was wondering, did you ever ask in that kind of study those involved on the other side, the
Procurers.
the procurers, the public institution people,
No.
what they felt were the constraints, bottlenecks, hindrances, you name it.
Well, we have done so in I don't know how many case studies, and we've also done a synthesis of case studies that are out there. So there are dozens of case studies where we can have a clear picture, and I think Max Wolfstone will also talk about the institutional barriers in organizations.
Yeah.
And he does it on a slightly more theoretical level, which is very, very good. But indeed, we have not done a survey of procurers. It's a matter of who finance and so on. So it's still something I would like to do, maybe across Europe. But the problem that I would have is, who would I target in the organization? Who would I send the questionnaire to? Ideally, at least 2 or maybe 3 people. The budget holder is different from the procurer. If I just go so in a way, it's methodologically a bit tricky to get this. It's also tricky for the survey of for firms. We always have this problem with CIS and so on. There is our issues who actually answers. But no, in short, we have a lot of interviews with procurers and with budget holders and with decision makers in all our case studies. But we have no not a comparable survey broadly.
Anyone else at this point?
I would be interested in knowing whether you did kind of a stratified analysis by level. So I guess you mostly spoke about national level agents here on the procurer side, so government departments, right? But on the city level, for instance, I guess there are big procurement budgets as well, and
Yes, I mean
potential for PPI.
In our survey, through the lens of the suppliers, we find that overall regional city municipalities in the UK, because you don't have a Bundesland, we do, in a way are worse than the national level. But then, of course, we have a lot of great success stories on city level. We have a great success story, for example, and that's very nice. 2 articles that I can recommend by my colleagues about waste management, the total change of the way waste management is organized, which involves, of course, a lot of public procurement of innovation, and that has been, so there are all kinds of good practices, but overall the awareness to do it is lower, and I think it might have to do also with the problem of who benefits. Now, if we use our public money at all for economic development, then the main criteria is how can I make sure, and if it's above the EU threshold, then it's quite tricky, but you can try to find ways. How can I make sure that the money is spent locally? And then, of course, the second question is maybe there's some innovation in it, but it's not so much how can I make sure I get the innovation no matter where I spend it. That's it. So there's a bit of, they don't have that much money, and so there are tensions there, I think. So overall, the question is, the answer in our survey is they are a bit less prone to do it. But the picture is very differentiated, of course.
Okay.
I have one question to Professor. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. From my understanding, there are 2 approaches that you have been highlighted. First, the government create demand to trigger innovation, and the second approach is the government to respond to the existing innovation as early users. So, in this context, from your point of view, which can produce a quick win impact, or can provide a better spillover to the economy at the macro level?
Well, I'm sorry to say, it will depend. It will depend. Macro level. I mean, if you trigger something that that then is pretty quickly, I mean, if you trigger something as a public body, where there is a high likelihood that other public bodies or even private buyers have a similar need globally, then of course the trigger might have the bigger leverage because you really create a new market. So that's why I think the green procurement issue is so important, because we know that every municipality and every buyer, public buyer, will have this agenda. I mean, it won't go away. The carbon agenda won't go away. So if you trigger something that allows in your country some supplier in an area where this supplier is already at the forefront to do the next big thing, you might end up with quite an expensive purchase of this next big thing as a public body, but you might trigger all kinds of lead market effects then for this supplier. And now, of course, there's a tension: is it a national supplier? Do you at the macro level in Malaysia or not? So especially for developing and emerging economies, this is a very tricky agenda. It's a very tricky agenda. I have an executive education course in science, technology, innovation policy with policymakers from all over the world and a lot of developing countries, and I've done it in South African countries and so on. And we discussed it very, problematically, because how can you make sure that there is also an effect for your own economy when doing so? But I think there are all kinds of ways in which you make sure that proximity and interaction make a difference and matter in what you buy. So you can look at what kinds of needs do I have, what kind of suppliers do I have, and what kinds of things can I demand that make it more likely that there is a push there as well. But it depends. If it's diffusion, quick diffusion, that makes a bigger difference. And then you have to ask, impact on what? Impact on the economy in terms of the suppliers, or impact on the innovation systems in terms of the societal need that is maybe tackled by using the technology.